So, hi, Lavonda. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you could just, I like to start before I get into the actual interview. If you could just tell us a little bit about what you're reading right now or a good TV show or movie you've seen recently.
Uh, like it doesn't matter what kind of TV show.
Give me
Okay. We're watching Lovecraft Country on
I've heard
HBO.
reviews.
I love it because there's this kind of like fantasy like realm. There's some weird stuff happening, but there's also like this like racial energy that they're really addressing because it's happening in like the 50s. So there's like Jim Crow laws and like stuff is like going down. So there's some hidden messages in there, and Jordan Peele's a producer. So there's lots of like hidden messages that you wouldn't know, like racially, what's happening in the world. And then there's magic. So that also makes it fun.
Hmm, that's cool. I might have to try because I've definitely been getting like mixed reviews, but I've had more people say they enjoy it than not. So try that one out.
If you like weird stuff,
I
then
do.
you'll love it.
All right, I'm gonna put that on my list. All right, so thank you for that. So I guess we'll jump right on into it. So if you could tell us a little bit more about your role and your career, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So essentially, I see families, couples, individuals, and help them through anything relating to the mental health field. Um, when I'm seeing like couples, there could be like some communication issues, individuals suffering from anxiety, depression, and children that usually come in with behavioral issues, but really they're suffering from their own kind of like anxiety, depression, or any type of feelings that they just don't understand how to process. And I support people to connect, see some negative patterns, and change them to positive ones.
Very cool. Awesome. And what does a typical day look like for you? Like, do you have a lot of clients in the day? Is it a lot of paperwork?
So I get to make up how my day looks. It is recommended that a clinician see no more than 5 or 6 people in a day because it is just very taxing. If you've ever been in, I don't know, school all day is long, right? So imagine trying to process listening to somebody and supporting people for an extended amount of time. It's very, very exhausting to be present in that extent. So no more than 5 or 6 clients. There is paperwork involved depending on the type of agency. So if you work for a community mental health agency, there is more paperwork that's required because there's managed care companies, which are insurance companies that require you to document a lot to say that these people need these services. Once you get into like a group practice or like a private practice, it's much less because it's just you and the client and you're responsible, and maybe you're not using insurance, so you don't have to report as much to anyone. So it's just your notes for your good work.
Okay, very cool. And how did you become interested in that field?
Um, Half of it was friends in the 8th grade. I was their couples counselor, so they told me I should be a therapist. So I wrote onto that. But also, I think my family experience has lended me the opportunity to say that at some point we stop knowing how to use our own voices. And sometimes we need a little bit of assistance to find our voice again and really be able to use it. So I've always just wanted to be the voice of the people
Okay.
from their head because sometimes we get stuck there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So it's since 8th grade. So is it safe to say your undergraduate major is in your field? It was
Yes, it is.
okay. And what did you study?
I studied psychology in undergrad,
Okay.
uh, and it is very much necessary because that's the way you can go psychology, criminal justice. Some people do social work. They're all different, but psychology is probably the one that could lend you to the biggest expansion of opportunities. So I would definitely say go that route for undergrad. It's when you get to grad school that you can kind of venture out to say which path is going to be more direct for you, because there's a couple different ones once you hit grad school.
Okay. Could you share a couple of
Yeah,
them?
sure. So I have a marriage and family therapist. So that's one. We also have licensed professional counselor, and then you have like social work. So social work clinicians focus more on helping people have resources and different systems in that way. So if you work in like the city of Philadelphia, they have like the Department of Human Services, which have a lot of social workers, and they get services to families. Licensed professional counselor, they are more linear in their thinking. So they will just work on the person, like, what's your problem? Here's your solution, more behavioral. And then if you're working as a marriage and family therapist, we are systems thinkers. So we're asking you lots about your families, how did you grow up, and how it impacted you. And then we also want to know like everything about you. What's your day look like? Who do you work for? Because everything is impacting us all day, unconsciously. So we're pulling all the systems in and exploring how that works all together.
Mm, very cool. And then,
Yeah.
so between social work and therapists, I feel like the pay is very different, right? Like what?
So okay. If you work for yourself, you probably could generally set your own price pay. When you go into like government systems, they have a set price point. And then when you work for like community mental health agencies, they also have their own set price point, because sometimes they're getting their money from the government. Now, if they're private, they have their own money, but they're also still getting money from the insurance companies and set a certain price point. So you may make a little bit less financially, especially when you're first coming out. But if your plan is to, like, if you want to be a director, or if you want to move up higher ranks into like management, you can have a pretty good income. Just the levels of energy that it takes when you're working in community mental health. It's a fantastic rewarding when you're working with the clients, because you just meet some of the most genuine people who have real life happening to them, but also still find ways to like make it through. But sometimes when you get into bureaucracies, there's just levels to it, and you just have to be able to adjust and be flexible and be focused on the work.
Okay.
That was really democratic of me to say it that way, but that's I'm diplomatic.
Question, Danielle.
Yeah.
It kind of relates to what you just said. So are there any other qualities or skills that someone may need to be successful in your career?
Flexibility. And I think also an inner awareness, because a lot of times when you become a therapist, you have to see a therapist yourself or be willing to do the work, because you have to know what it's like to experience someone like looking at you from the outside, and know what that feeling is like. So it's really helpful for you to be willing to always be growing and changing and taking a look on your inside, because a lot of times if we can't inspire a client to grow, it's because we're not willing to grow ourselves.
That's good. It seems like seeing a therapist would be helpful as a therapist too, because you're hearing everybody else's problems all day and like just heavy. Like I could feel like that would be very
Yep.
Good.
So consultation or supervision is really important, along with like having a space where you get to have your voice heard too.
Good stuff. Great question, Chantel. And Basima, you can hop in whenever too if you have questions along the way. So what do you enjoy most about your job?
I get to meet all kinds of people.
Okay.
That is I love people. It's just, there are people from different walks of life. They do every kind of job. And I'm like, what job do you do? And it's like things that you've never heard of. And just like culturally and different experiences people have. there are really some good people in the world, especially when the world is like not so pretty. You get to create relationships with people who just want to be good and do really well. And you get to be a part of that journey. So that's always really rewarding for me.
Very cool. And then how about what problems do you see with your job, or what do you not like so much about it?
I don't like upper management, but this is also maybe just like a personal thing that I don't like having a boss and being told what to do.
Yeah.
I've always been told I'm bossy. You can ask my mom. So that was it. What don't I like? I don't know. And maybe it's just as earlier in my career there were things that I didn't like, but as I'm more mature and I've been in it for over 10 years, like I'm falling in love with it more and more. Yeah, the paperwork is sometimes annoying and sometimes the days are more emotionally draining, but I think I still can say that I love what I do, even though there's some things that are just going to annoy me about it.
Okay. All right. And then how does your job affect like your general lifestyle or like your work-life balance?
I would say earlier in my career, there wasn't a work-life balance. I would just work. And you are so emotionally invested into these families that essentially become your own. So sometimes you take work home. And so you have to learn how to not take work home and not to worry, because I've worked with children who were suicidal. You're worried about parents and their safety with the kids if they're going to abuse them. So at times the emotional task of the work would come home with me. So I would have to learn how to set boundaries with the work. Now, when I cut off my computer, when I leave the office, I am off work. And I have to feel confident in myself that if someone did need me, they would reach out, or that we've worked really hard enough to create a safety plan. Well, they would utilize those skills if they really, really needed help.
Okay, that's good. I need to take a couple pages of your book, because as a school counselor, we take some stuff home too all the time.
Gotta turn it off. You gotta turn it off.
So important. So important. All right. Okay. In the world now, or just in your field, like, are there any issues or trends in the field that students or people who are interested in that career should be aware of?
Yeah, racial and social injustice, the whole pandemic, an election, anything that can cause us anxiety right now. And depression is causing anxiety and depression in this sense of helplessness globally, right? Like sometimes we don't feel like there's anything that we can do in our lives and we can't handle it. And now a lot of clients are feeling this overwhelming sense of needing to do something, but not being able to on a global sense. So I think that has been the biggest trend, because it's since quarantine has started, my caseload has gone completely full. And it's been a gift and a curse, because people are looking more inwards and reaching out for help as they need it. But it's also triggered like some thoughts that people never thought they were having before, because we were distracted by leaving the house and being so engaged with the outside world.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. There's definitely a lot going on right now. I can see how that your job has definitely become a lot going on. Now, so this is a little bit off topic, but just because you said that, for someone who is going through that mental state and dealing with some heavy stuff with the pandemic and stuff like that, what type of stuff do you tell them, or how to cope with things like that?
So what's usually really helpful is having a structured day. A lot of times when we don't know what to do, sometimes we can distract ourselves with like the simple things, right? Because going to work and having a schedule really gives us a sense of purpose and intention. And it reminds us that like we are valuable in this world. So really helping clients to find some structure in their daily life has been really useful. And just processing out loud, like what are they feeling versus stuffing those feelings in and avoiding it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I have another question. So what are like the demographics you've worked with?
So I work with all demographics, but a lot of Black and Brown people have been seeking therapy recently. And I think what's happening is they're more accepting, and it's not a stigma to go see a therapist, to see someone else. Because usually Black and Brown families, it's like you go to church and you talk to somebody in your family or you talk to your pastor. That is like what we've been taught, and now it's more accepting and more open to go seek outside help for some support. So definitely I've seen an influx of Black and Brown people in my caseload.
And what about like the age population? Do you work with all ages?
I see 16 and up.
Oh.
I used to work with younger kids. It's a little different when you're doing telehealth. They're not as attuned. But most of my clients are young adults. Yeah.
Okay. Have you been virtual since March?
Yes, I have.
Wow. Yeah, we have been.
And I love it.
Okay.
I love it. I do.
Well, good. That's good.
I love virtual. Now, doing in-person therapy is wonderful. Like, I do love it. I love being able to feel the actual energy when you are with a person. There is something different. But I also don't mind working from home. If I don't have to get in the car, I can just pop over to my little office space and turn on the computer. And people are they're more relaxed when they're in their own home.
I can see
Right?
that.
I used to do in-home treatment, and people would just be themselves. Like, you show up to somebody's house, they're in their PJs like they would be, and they act towards their kids like they would really act all the time. Versus like if you come into an office space, people are like, and they're reserved. So
okay, good.
That's surprised. I'm actually a little surprised to hear that. I would think like because if you're in an office space and it's just like you two in a closed door, they will feel more comfortable and compared to virtual where there's maybe people in the background. So like, is it sometimes difficult to maintain confidentiality?
I think people figure it out. I think I have clients that go in the car. They're like, I need my privacy, so I'll go in the car. Let me think. The parents are the ones that I'm most impressed with, because they will sit their kids wherever they need to be and say, Mommy and Daddy's doing therapy. And the kids are really great, and they stay and they don't interrupt. So I'm usually most impressed with them of being able to put their kids to the side and take care of therapy. But yeah, people they feel great. They take care of it. They find the space. People that didn't want to do therapy at home didn't do therapy at home. When I said I'm going virtual, they were like, okay, I'm done. And I think a lot of people are making that choice. Now, some therapists are seeing people in person. I'm not sure if I feel comfortable seeing a whole bunch of people in person, like flowing through the office, and then you got to clean and do all that stuff. And it's a very intimate space. I don't want to be 6 feet apart from my client. I want to be able to have a regular interaction with them. So
makes sense.
So I have a few questions, and I guess this one's going off of boundaries that you talked about before. So do you make yourself available to clients like outside of hours, or do you let them contact you? It's just like when you turn the computer off.
I turn the computer on. I have regular, probably like a 9 to 8 kind of response time, because I do work in the evening time. So I will respond to emails. But I have 48 hours to respond, as long as it's not a crisis.
And that brings me to my next question. So are you a mandated reporter, or what fields are?
I am a mandated reporter. So anybody that's working with like children and hospitals and schools, anybody who is a service worker, like police officers, all that direct work. So yeah, I'm a mandated reporter.
So then that means that you work with Child Protective Services and police investigations if you need to?
Sometimes, but I have to be subpoenaed to. So I don't have to, and I would have to get a lawyer involved, because my license is kind of like on the line. I would never just go to court. If somebody was like, we need you to show up to court and testify on our behalf, I need to be subpoenaed by the court, and then I would take a lawyer with me.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Great questions. All right.
Those were good questions.
I love it. Oh, and what I didn't ask, I'm going to backtrack a little bit too. You said that you had your undergrad in psych and then your grad in marriage and family therapy. Do you have to have anything post grad school, or can you?
The GREs.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yep. Take the GREs.
If you
pick your track, and then you go.
Okay. If you wanted to become like a doctor and write scripts and all that, you could do that? That
would require me to go to medical school.
Okay.
So being a psychiatrist requires you to actually go to medical school. There's another one called a PsyD, which is a doctoral, like a PhD, but you're able to do like clinical evaluations and assessments. So they just can't prescribe medication. Okay. So like if you need an evaluation for a diagnosis, they will give you like a really extended one. So I can diagnose somebody, but I'm not going to write up like all the details of what I see. They will do a whole write up and all that extensive like work, which is lovely. Mm-hmm. You get paid more money as well, but it's also more school. Mm-hmm. So you have to be mindful of like how much school that you want to go to. I had a 3-year master's program, and then postmasters, I do 2 years of supervision. And I have to take a licensure exam. So I have to be licensed in whatever state that I want to practice in. Okay. Now with your licensure, do you have to do continued learning, continued education to keep it? Yep. So every 2 years, you have to do 30 hours of continuing education. And so most of those continuing education could be like 3 credit hours for whatever, so you just have to add up to 30. There are some that are required. So like the child abuse reporting is required. Suicide awareness training is required. So just and some ethics. So like around the law and stuff are required trainings. Okay. Cool. Do you have any additional like long-term career goals? Like, are you where you want to be, or you have plans? So I am growing my own personal private practice right now. It's called True Center for Health and Healing. So it's just me and the practice. I'm torn on if I want to. Thank you. I'm torn on if I want to have other clinicians working with me, because then I kind of have to be a boss. Mm-hmm. Not sure. But you like my. right. But my goal is to expand it to an actual like a health center. So then there'll be fitness and different types of wellness involved, because like working out is super important to me. And I think there's a whole mind-body connection that happens for people. And I think there's a lot of science behind how we're taking care of our bodies to how it impacts our minds. Yeah. It's a little side note, like I've known Lavonda for a really long time, but that I can see the vision. I see that totally you with health and wellness and all of that. Yeah. So good for you. I love it. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry. Are there any other, or what other professionals do you work closely with? Like crisis teams or like.
So I will work close with psychiatrists, nurse practitioners. If there's a family involved, anybody who's involved with their system. So like schools, case managers, if they have a probation officer, I try to work closely with those people, because you want to be in the know of everything that's happening and how it's impacting them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And what type of advice would you have for someone who might be interested in the field or isn't sure yet? How can they explore a little more? So I like the idea of like becoming a mentor, or seeing what kind of like volunteer programs are available
with working with like little kids and kind of seeing how they feel like being in that leadership role and kind of practicing holding other people's stuff, because I a little bit different of it requires a different emotional space to be able to be in. So I would say definitely some mentorship and volunteering, or just calling a therapist and having a chat with them to see what their day is like. And there's different types, so you might want to explore like the different types to see like, oh, well, maybe I would want to do this kind of therapy versus that. So just being really mindful of that.
Okay. Awesome. And okay, are there, I think Chantel asked something similar to this when you talked about inner awareness and flexibility. So I'm going to skip that one. How would you suggest someone just getting started to set themselves apart from the competition?
Be willing to learn.
Okay.
I wouldn't say this is a competitive field. I would say this is a can you handle this field? Right. So having that self-awareness and be willing to look inside to see where you need to learn and grow. And the practice of holding other people's stuff. Because I think once you get here, it's very different from what you learned in school. So if you're open to the process and you're patient with it, then that will set you apart from everybody else. Because there's more therapists needed all the time.
Yeah. That's cool. Especially people of color. I feel like a lot of people are looking for someone who looks like them nowadays too.
Yep.
Very
yep.
good.
Also male. Females very easily choose to be therapists. For whatever reason, it's not a very male dominated field. So I would say that's also something to be like conscious of. So if you know any males that are good helpers, they're needed too.
Okay. It's good to know. Awesome. Do we have any other questions from anyone else?
Yeah, I have one more question. So how do you deal with the relationship between you and like a client not being a good fit? Do you leave it up to the client to end it, or do you just like go with the flow?
That is the hardest question and thing to do. When you if you're doing consultation or you have some kind of supervision, it makes it easier to process that out loud, to say like, okay, this is not what I need. When you are more individual and by yourself, you don't want to leave people hanging. But you do have to be really transparent is what I find to be helpful, is saying like, always checking in with the client. How do you think this is going? And then I have to be vulnerable with myself even to say like, I don't know if I'm being really helpful. What do you think? So I make it a collaborative experience for the both of us to see if they're okay with it, because it's essentially like breaking up with someone that you've created a relationship with, and saying that like, I think that maybe someone else could be more helpful to you is very hard, but also it's part of my ethical responsibility to give people the help that they need. And that sometimes means giving them to someone else.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good question. Now with that, do they have to do some sort of intake questionnaire or anything like that for you?
Not for me. I would, so like I just transferred a client who had more like eating disorders, and that's not really my specialty, but it kept coming up in session. And so then I have to like go to my colleagues to say like, who specializes in this? And then I just refer out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions at all?
No? How does like release of service, like how do you know when a client is ready to be done, or do they just continue to receive therapy for as long as they want?
So it depends. If you are in community mental health and you're going through an agency, they have to be referred to that agency and approved for that service. And those services only last a certain amount of time. When someone's coming into private practice, they can go as long as they want to go. Sometimes they have to be kicked out the door because they just find a lot of comfort in the therapy room. But in order for us to grow, we actually have to practice the skills that we learn in the therapy room outside of it. So sometimes it's saying, I think you're ready, even though they're really scared, because essentially being with your therapist is like a blanket. But it's usually a collaborative decision that needs some pushing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. So listen, that was really helpful. Do you have any like closing remarks or something? Not even necessarily with that career, but for students who are first years in college, navigating life right now. College doesn't look like it typically would. Life doesn't look like it typically would. Any type of advice or guidance for them?
I'd like to tell them to, one, grieve the loss of the college experience that you were supposed to have. I think we try to just push through life and say everything's okay, but actually, like, it stinks that they didn't get the experience that everybody else had. And then I would also say, give yourself some grace and patience, because it's not like, if you're not used to going to virtual school, if you've never done online school, and then on top of that, a college like level courses, it's not easy. So give yourself some grace to move through that and patience.
I love that. I love that. I think a lot of times people are just like, get over it, or it'll go back to normal, when it might never go back to normal. And it's definitely a big deal that they're losing out on an experience, or their experience looks different than typical. They're still in college, which is an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. I thank you so much, LaVonda. That was really helpful. I love these things. Listen, I can do these all year. Hopefully we can get some more students on here, because I love all what the students bring, and I'll share this. So I'm going to actually start recording so I